Thank you so much to Makram, all of the organizers, for letting me come back to our homeland of my great-grandfathers, my mother's family, and my wife's family. So, shukran, and thank you. And I dedicate this paper to all of those who are being held captive in Sweden right now. God bless the Muwahhidun. The Druze, as depicted in plays and films by non-Druze playwrights, screenwriters, directors, fall into two distinct categories, namely as a mysterious quasi-religious sect that follow their beliefs literally, or as a strict social group that adheres to tradition dogmatically, yet with little reason behind their fanatical beliefs. There have been surprisingly few representations of the Druze in theater or film, but the few that exist provide a fascinating view of how the Druze are often misportrayed and, more importantly, misunderstood. This paper examines three works that focus on Druze characters: Robert Browning's 1843 dramatic poem, The Return of the Druzes, Iran Riklis and Soha Arraf's 2004 film, The Syrian Bride, and the 2016 play When Farah Cries, or Andama Tabki Farah, by Syrian playwright Mudar al-Haji. What these three dramatic film examples demonstrate is that in dramatic representations, the Druze remain an esoteric, mysterious, rigidly cloistered group that tolerates little by way of dissent or social resistance. What is missing, however, is a deeper understanding of the Tawheed faith and how it shapes, guides, and governs the lives of Druze, both the initiated and the uninitiated. Without a fundamental understanding of the Tawheed faith, these representations risk misrepresenting the Druze people. And in a time when this minority is being persecuted, these misrepresentations can be dangerous because they risk portraying the Druze as a heretical sect that's deserving of little empathy or understanding. In his seminal book, Orientalism, Edward Said, Allah yarhamu, writes that when attempting to analyze Orientalist texts, one must place emphasis on the evidence, which is not visible as representations and not as the quote-unquote natural depictions of the Orient. And these representations are found in histories, philologies, political treatises, and artistic texts. He states, quote, "The thing to look at are style, figures of speech, setting, narrative devices, historical and social circumstances, not the correctness of the representation, nor its fidelity to some great original." As he clearly remarks, Orientalists believe that since the Orientals could not represent themselves, it was the duty of the Westerner to represent the Orient for them. And these representations are highly organized and encoded systems which employ many devices to express, indicate, and exchange messages and information of what they represent. What Said calls the represence cannot depend on the Orient, and Orientalism stands forth and away from the Orient, making its sense on the Westerner rather than on the Orient. I relate Said's notion regarding representation in Orientalism to Robert Browning's play The Return of the Druzes. Browning, who always fancied himself a dramatist, but whose dramatic poems were complex yet nearly unstageable, attempted to portray the Druze society in exile from their Lebanese homeland. According to Browning biographers William Hall Griffin and Harry Christopher Micheal, The Return of the Druzes is based on an idea Browning found in Biographie universelle ancienne et moderne. Browning scholar Joe Phelan states that Browning also turned to C.F. Volney's travels through Syria and Egypt in the years of 1783, and also Alphonse de Lamartine's travel in the East, including a journey to the Holy Land written in 1832 to 33. All of this is to say that Browning had no first-hand experience of the Druze, and like most Orientalists, relied on second-hand accounts for his information. He clearly had no intention of accurately portraying the Druze, though to his credit, he does insert several names and details that make the play seemingly well-researched. He does mention Hamza, for instance. But by utilizing these texts, Browning has furthered the outward misperceptions of the Druze than to have any serious attempt at accurately conveying the core beliefs of the Tawheed faith. By doing so, he further implicates the Druze as an irrational, bloodthirsty, esoteric sect that doggedly adheres to antiquated notions of patriarchy, religious zealotry, and an unexamined herd mentality. Browning's 5-act play concerns a group of Druze elders, or Micheal, who are exiled to the islet of the southern Sporades, garrisoned by the Knights Hospitallers of Rhodes. These Druze are accompanied by a Druze man named Jebel, who they believe is the reincarnation of Al-Hakim bi-Imr Allah himself. But this Jebel, who knows he's an impostor, yet perpetuates his deception to inspire his fellow Druze to revolt, promises to liberate the Druze from the Knights and return them to their native homeland of Lebanon. Jebel loves a Druze woman named Anil, who is also loved by Loy de Dru, a knight novice who wishes to take over as the new prefect of the islet where the Druze are exiled. Another Druze initiate named Khalil believes Jebel is God Hakim, although Jebel is feeling tremendous guilt for lying to his people and his love Anil. Anil rejects Loy's affection, preferring Jebel, who she loves, as a man, not as a divine being. Jebel decides to murder the prefect who is imprisoning him and his people on the island. When he attempts to slay him behind the curtain, he realizes that Anil has killed the prefect herself. Jebel then reveals he is not Hakim, but as Browning calls him, but just another ordinary Druze, something that she is happy to hear, though she insists he confess himself to the other Druze. Jebel then decides not to tell them the truth of his identity, but rather to use the falsehood to inspire his people to revolt and return to the Lebanese homeland. When Jebel finally does confess to his duplicitous nature, Anil, in her excitement and love for his noble soul, inexplicably dies, calling him Hakim. Jebel then stabs himself and tells his Druze brethren, "On to the mountain, at the mountain Druzes," and also dies. He could have just applied for this conference and come himself, but he didn't. Browning's drama conveys much of the Orientalist notions the British had about the Druze during his lifetime, and his play is rife with inaccuracies and inconsistencies. For instance, instead of being called Al-Hakim, Jebel is called Hakim. The character's name Jebel is actually an antiquated British term for the uninitiated Druze, which of course are called the Juhal. Although Browning does write that the Druze are attired in, quote, the ancient dress of the Druzes, consisting of a distinctive black vest and white turban, he also adds racist descriptions such as their glozing accent, their swarthy looks, and their small Arab thin-lipped silver mouths. Who knows what that means? As far as descriptions of the Druze religion are concerned, the Druze are called a mystic tribe, a simple tribe, and savage wizards. Browning's understanding of the Druze people and faith is confused, to say the least. On the one hand, he seems to grasp the importance of Al-Hakim to the Druze and the importance of the Druze have given to his return and reemergence. However, he also fails to understand what the scriptures say about the return of Al-Aql and the subsequent Day of Judgment, or Yawm al-Din, as the Tawheed faith ascribes to the second coming. As Dr. Anis Abaid states in his book, The Druze and Their Faith in Tawheed, implicit in the disappearance of Al-Hakim, like that of Al-Mahdi, in the 12-ver Shia tradition, is the belief in the triumphal return of the vanished Imam as a redeemer and savior. According to Dr. Sami Nasib Makarim, Allah yarhamu, in his book, The Druze Faith, those muwahhidun who accepted the divine call 1,000 years ago, quote, would be liable for them on the final judgment day, and their lives would be measured against the promises they had made in the contracts. According to Nassim Dana in his book, The Druze in the Middle East, on the Day of Judgment, Al-Hakim would be revealed in a human image and would judge the world by means of the sword, al-Saif, and in a brutal manner, Unf. And furthermore, according to Druze historian Dr. Sami Suwaid, all of the Hudud will return on Judgment Day. On that day, he says, goodness will prevail over evil, justice over injustice, and truth over falsehood. Emancipation from ignorance, jahl, is the essence of the Day of Judgment to the Druze faith. The Druze believe that the day is very near and that what is required of them is to contemplate and meditate that nearness. Therefore, Browning's entire premise for the play Return of the Druzes is predicated upon what a Roman dramatist might call the happy idea that Jebel could possibly deceive his followers into believing he was Al-Hakim bi-Imr Allah. In fact, the fact that they can and do believe him lies in his characterization of the Druze in the play as, quote, simple-hearted Druze, unquote, who believe him and who are infantile compared to their European counterparts. According to Phelan Browning, who saw the Druze as by synecdoche, the Arabs are naive, credulous, childlike, and implicitly in need of European leadership and guidance. And according to another Browning scholar, Gal Manor, Browning's early works from the early and middle period imply that, quote, the Orientals are developmentally backward, ruled by passion, and destined for conversion to Christianity, unquote. And as Said notes, Arabs in the Orientalist literature are often characterized by primitivism, occultism, and anchoring in the past. So Manor posits that Browning's Oriental images coincided with the Victorian cultural ideology that Semites were in a state of arrested development, with a culture characterized by primitive magic and superstition. Manor states that in the play, quote, the Druze religion is emptied of meaning and depicted as false and groundless, whereas Christianity is not similarly dissected, unquote. Browning initially wrote to William Macready, the famous actor-manager of the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, hoping he would produce his play, which Browning described as rife with drabbing, stabbing, and other pretty tricks. But Macready was decidedly unimpressed, writing in his diary, I read Browning's play, and with the deepest concern, I yield to the belief that he will never write again. To any purpose. I fear his intellect is not quite clear. I do not know how to write back to Browning. So, along with his misgivings about the text, Macready feared that the audience must be acquainted with the Druze before they'd be willing to watch a play about them. And in his response to Macready, Browning wrote that Victorian audiences, quote, know nothing of the Druzes and their doings until I tell them, which is the office I take on myself, as they are men and women oppressed and outraged in such and such way, desirous of being rid of their oppressor and outrager, unquote. Needless to say, Browning's play never made it to the London stage, thank goodness. According to K.P. Sarati, Browning's plays are unactable because he was never able to project the feelings, thoughts, and motives of his characters onto the public stage in a way that a theatrical audience would demand. Browning could not escape from his egocentrism and his constant habit of introspection to create genuine stage characters. And ultimately, The Return of the Druzes is a failed experiment for many reasons. Its overly grandiloquent language, its melodramatic characterizations, and most importantly in our context, its greatly orientalized treatment of the Druze and their faith in Tawheed. Now, director Iran Riklis and screenwriter Suha Arraf, their 2004 film, The Syrian Bride, which takes place in the occupied Golan Heights, offers a more nuanced and humanistic portrayal of Druze life in the 21st century. The film is set in the Golan village of Majd al-Shams during two major events. The blissful event of the marriage of Muna, the young Druze woman in the Golan, betrothed to Talal, her Syrian actor who stars in Musalsalat in Damascus. And he's kind of a comic ghawar figure. And simultaneously, Muna's father, Hamid, who has recently been released from an Israeli prison, who's decided to join his fellow Druze in a march commemorating the death of the former president Hafiz al-Assad. By doing so, however, he violates the rules of parole, and an Israeli officer warns Hamid to avoid the protest or risk being arrested. The family gathers for the wedding, including Muna's profligate brother Marwan and her older brother Hatim, who returns from self-imposed exile with his Russian doctor wife Elena and their young son. The Druze sheikhs gather at Hamid's home and tell him that if his son Hatim is invited to the wedding, they will not only not attend the wedding, they will cast Hamid out of the Druze circle. The last subplot involves Muna's sister Amal and her husband Amin, married in an arranged manner and who have become estranged over time. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead. The film addresses several issues that are pertinent to the Druze generally, such as endogamy and group affiliation, and the precarious situation the Druze living in the Golan must face being divided from their families in Syria. According to Janan Farj Falah, Yusuf Maman, and Wafa Amasa, since 1967, the social and marital relations between Syrians and those residing in the Golan have decreased significantly. Quote, in the last 30 years, only 130 marriages have taken place among the different Druze villages in the Golan Heights. In most cases of marriage were between Israeli Druze men of the Golan with their Syrian female relatives. The authors also note that endogamy is compulsory in Druze societies. The Druze religion, they say, prohibits polygamy and demands women's full consent to marriage. However, it strictly prohibits its men to marry women from different communities or religions and vice versa. A person who violates this law is banned to be eliminated and outcast from the community. This custom is the result of the elders, the religious leaders, to create greater cohesion among the community members, and thus they had to come to the conclusion that marriage within the clan or community would develop mutual love and caring, an element which was needed in the past to cope with the pressure and persecution of their environment. And so this film, which focuses on the fact that there is endogamy that occurs in the Druze society, in many ways very much is correct. However, by focusing its attention so strictly upon the fact that the Mashiach are against this marriage, it often gives the dogmatic interpretation that the Druze hold on to these beliefs strictly because they're dogma and they have no real underpinnings in the society itself. And in truth, what the film fails to do is to discuss the idea of endogamy as a unifying force within the Druze community, and that's why it exists. So by portraying Muna's betrothal in this way, it again ascribes the Druze as strictly dogmatic and unchangeable in many ways for no reason. And if you are not familiar with the Druze sect, you would have no idea about why that matters. Furthermore, in the play When Farah Cries, which is written by a Syrian playwright, the character comes from Suwaida, and she has a father who's a doctor in Suwaida. And similarly, she is dating a Sunni man, and the father is not, of course, he is not accepting of this relationship. However, again, without understanding the Druze, it just seems that the father is dogmatically holding on to a belief that might be rigid and cruel rather than one that is based in a religious or social tradition. So all of these things, I believe, further disassociate the Druze from their belief in Tawheed in the eyes of non-Druze people. So I'm just going to wrap up with this last section about how the Tawheed faith is portrayed. The difficulty with these representations of the Druze is that sometimes they're the only ones that exist. And by having so few portrayals of the Druze in theater and film, audiences might believe that these are completely accurate portrayals. Furthermore, the Druze are not a homogeneous community, so more representations of their varied communities throughout the Middle East and the diaspora are needed. The remedy? We need more dimensional dramatizations of the Druze and their faith in Tawheed. One complication is that there are so few Druze working in theater and film. And because of that, we don't have the people who might have the interest in portraying the Druze more dimensionally, the way that other groups have. So I would urge all of you who might have children that are interested in going into the arts or into film to please consider that as a viable option, not only because it's... Please do. Not only because the arts, I think, are very life-enriching, but also because until we actually take control of the narratives, we are never going to be portrayed realistically, in my opinion. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us to not keep waiting for someone else to portray us honestly, but rather it's incumbent upon us to do so ourselves. So thank you very much. Shukran.